Hi, I'm Kimberly Gladden, the Director of Discipleship. I want to welcome you to today's webinar. We are so excited because today we're going to be talking about holistic discipleship. As we get started, I want you to know we're also streaming live from Facebook and YouTube. And if you'd like to enter the conversation, and we really hope you do, come on into the chat room on YouTube. Ask questions, offer your comments. It'd be great to hear your thoughts on this subject, and you can get into that chat room on YouTube. Today we're talking about holistic discipleship. What do we mean when we say holistic discipleship? What are we trying to say? You know, put simply, it means that there is a comprehensive Christ-like lifestyle that leads us to a transformed life, a transformed church, and a transformed community. So happy to have with me today Jackie Bledsoe. Jackie is our digital resource coordinator for CMAD. Many of you know Jackie via email and phone conversations. Today, he's going to be talking live. So Jackie, so happy to have you as co-host today.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
We have two special guests. Excited to welcome today Phil Wiseman and Megan Koch from Ransom Church in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Phil is the downtown campus pastor. Megan is the Restore pastor. And welcome to both of you. So happy to have you on today's webinar about holistic discipleship.
Great to be here.
You know, as we begin today's discussion, I just want to remind us of the 5 prompts. We do this every time we start just to kind of bring together the thought that we are not saying any particular model that you have to use, but we're saying whatever your discipleship model is, we're asking you to run it through 5 lenses. We're asking you to ask the question, is my model intentional? Is it relational? Is it holistic, multiplying, and lifelong? And today we want to stop and focus on the 3rd prompt, which is holistic. And so I just want to jump right in to today's conversation, and I want to start with Phil and Megan. I'd like you to, first of all, just tell us a little bit about your roles there at Ransom Church.
My name is Phil Wiseman. I'm the downtown campus pastor at the Ransom Church. So that means I oversee all the staff and the congregation at our downtown campus. I also oversee our life group ministries and kind of by implication our discipleship ministries. So that's my primary area of supervision.
And my name is Megan Cook. I'm the Restore pastor at the Ransom. And so I lead our Restore team. It's a prayer team where people can come by appointment. And we like to say that it's a prayer ministry that helps you get clarity and resolution about what holds you back and weighs you down. So that takes up quite a bit of my time. And then I also create discipleship content with Phil.
And we are very grateful for that discipleship content that you're creating. Let's kick it off by just asking, when we throw out the term holistic discipleship, let's start with Megan and Phil, and then I'm going to come around to Jackie. Holistic discipleship, what comes to mind? If we say word association, or what comes to mind when we bring up that term holistic discipleship?
I think about just complete embodiment in your approach to following Jesus. And one of the things that I've been reading a lot about lately is how we're learning more and more the ways that our habits form us, right? It actually reshapes our brain into creating us into a new kind of person. And so the kind of discipleship that we want is that, the kind that creates new pathways in our actual brain so that we become people who just naturally, instinctively do the things that Jesus would do. So we're trying to establish a method of discipleship that's not just cognitive, not just about the things that you learn, although that's part of it, of course, but also is habitual, something that we put into practice on a regular basis.
Megan, what about for you? We say holistic discipleship. What comes to mind for you?
For me, I think one of the most important things is when we think about discipleship, so often people try to focus on, trying to learn about Jesus, reading scripture, getting to know it, things like that. But really, what a disciple is it's not simply a Christian who's learning about Jesus or even trying to consider what Jesus would do, but it's a Christian who has made a deliberate decision to follow Jesus. And that ultimately saying that we want to be someone who's deliberately following Jesus, that means he is the master of our life, that he takes over everything. And so when we think about holistic discipleship, it's this picture of really entirely surrendering ourselves to Jesus and knowing that we're following an actual man, a person, that we're following Jesus who's actually with us in our everyday life. We're living our life with him. He's showing us how to live our life as he would live it if he was us, and that we can conversationally interact with him throughout the day, that it's not just about learning about him, but actually learning from him in our everyday life.
You know, it is so interesting that you brought that point up. I was just reading something in discipleship.org. It's actually a quote from Jim Putman, but it kind of ties into what you just said about this is more than just a transfer of knowledge. Listen to what he said. He said, most pastors in the U.S. long to teach a huge crowd of excited people on Sunday mornings, people packed into pews, pens and notebooks in hand, waiting for a download of all kinds of top-rated, inspiring information from the Bible. Amazingly, this kind of learning environment is exactly what a good school teacher would hate. A big classroom, a one-size-fits-all lecture style of teaching. Classroom teachers know that most people don't learn best by listening to lectures, yet many pastors believe they are making disciples by preaching sermons that teach their congregation what the Bible says. They see discipleship as simply a transfer of knowledge from teacher to student and expect the result to be a changed life. And so as we begin zeroing in on this concept of holistic discipleship, it goes beyond just a transfer of knowledge. Jackie, I'm going to turn to you. I say holistic discipleship. What comes to mind for you?
Yeah, the individual, just yourself as well, just in all aspects, intentionally following Christ. But I also think as the church, that it's just not one person or one area or one ministry is responsible to disciple and to bring people to Jesus and guide them in that lifestyle of following him. So I think it takes the entire body of Christ, your entire church, as well as your entire being, every aspect of your life.
I think that's a really important point because in my intro, I talked about how I oversee discipleship ministries at the church, but that's misleading because our worship pastor, our lead pastor, of course, our compassion ministries pastor, our children's pastor, and every single leader in the church, everybody's overseeing discipleship, right? So we don't want to divorce discipleship from all those other things because that's not holistic.
You know, I had an opportunity to visit Ransom Church, and I was impressed. One of the reasons that I wanted you to come on today's webinar, because when I look at the 5 aspects that we're trying to say are a lens for discipleship, they were all in place there at Ransom. And so I'm excited about what I saw happening and the integration that was happening. I want to talk a little bit about how discipleship has changed over the years. We're going to be getting in a moment to just a beautiful resource that both Phil and Megan have developed. But what led to, we're going to be talking about their new pathway of discipleship, but what came before that? What has changed at Ransom over the years that brought you to a point to want to do something new in discipleship?
Yeah, so Megan and I have both been at the Ransom since we started about 9 years ago. So we've been able to see all the kind of transformations and the ways that our thinking has progressed. I would say one thing that's been very constant with the Ransom is this commitment to service in the community. Every month, we're out in our community serving and blessing people in some way. So that's always been there, and that's always been huge, I think, and as simple as it sounds, just kind of that constant rhythm of being out in the community and serving people has been very transformational for our church. But we've also always had a small group model. We call them life groups here. And over time, we have started to realize that perhaps that's given us maybe an excuse to think that we're making disciples when we aren't necessarily. I'm not saying that life groups can't do that or don't do that. I think they absolutely do. However, probably not to the degree that we were satisfied with. And so we've moved into like an apprenticeship sort of model where you have a one-on-one sort of relationship with people. And we're seeing, in just a short amount of time we've been doing it, we're seeing a lot of wonderful results. And so that's a couple of things off the top of my head. I'm sure Megan has some other ideas because there's been some other stages of like adding like safe families for children, adding our Restore ministry, you might maybe share about that a little bit.
Yeah, we are always looking for ways to take what God is doing individually in each person in our church and immediately bring it outward together as a church body. And so, yeah, like Phil said, we have our our Safe Families ministry. That's a ministry where our congregation is networked with other churches in the city to be able to provide resources and mentoring and even temporary care for children who are in families in crisis. It essentially just prevents foster care from needing to happen in many circumstances for families. So we do things like that. We're always looking for ways to take what God is doing in each individual person and immediately join that with the people around us in our church and in our community.
You know, Megan, I want to stop there for a moment because that's a big deal. Safe families. I don't want to just mention that in passing because when we look at what Safe Families does, I'm not sure that everyone listening knows about this program, but it actually, church families will voluntarily accept a child to keep them out of a system. Say a mom has an emergency need. A single mom is going to the hospital, and she has nowhere to leave the children. That could lead to them going into foster care. But Safe Family steps in. That mom voluntarily brings the children to a safe family, and they say, "Hey, we'll watch the child while you're in the hospital." And so this is like a preventive. It is helping to on the side of caring for vulnerable children, helping to prevent children from going into foster care. And so when the extension of talking about holistic ministry that reaches out on all different levels, I think that is one of the highlights, your Safe Families program. And
one thing that I noticed just in this conversation and in all my interactions with the Ransom is just the level of generosity. My role with the Wesleyan Church is to partner with churches that have resources that they've created and share them so other churches can get it. And Ransom, you guys have been one of the most generous and excited to share churches that we've come across, and it shows in all the different things that you're doing. The Safe Families program is just giving that generosity. So is that something that has always been a part of the makeup of the Ransom Church?
I hope so. And we can't take much credit at all for like Safe Families. Angel Metzger's on our staff; she oversees that, and has just got a passion for it. And there's so many volunteers at our church that have stepped up and just volunteered their homes and their time in tremendous ways to that ministry. And it is truly one of those transformational things that I think a church can do. I mean, I can't imagine the gospel unfolding in any more sort of a tangible, profound way than in a ministry like this. We've also got volunteers that go into the jail every week, go into the juvenile detention center every week, and bring the gospel there. So, I mean, we could go on for a while about some of the crazy ways that people in our church are giving of themselves in this sort of way.
But the point is, we're talking about a discipleship that impacts every area of a church's life, that it's not just head knowledge, it's not just a small group, but every area. And that's part of what I'm seeing at Ransom, that you're on the front lines there, trying to really impact lives and communities and in tangible ways. I want to get to this beautiful resource that you've been developing called the Discipleship Pathway. I mean, we're excited to hear every month we bring on folks who will just share their model, and I'm excited for folks to hear about the Discipleship Pathway. Can you tell us how that came about, and then kind of walk us through, tell us a little bit about this Discipleship Pathway? Because I think it's a tool that, because you're so generous and make things available, that could be a blessing to a lot of different ministries.
Yeah, I'll give us kind of the overview and the background, and then Megan can take us into the specifics of the pathway. But, like I said earlier, we've grown a little bit dissatisfied with what we've seen in our life groups, and I don't want to make it sound as though it's any way bad, or that churches shouldn't do groups, and we do small groups, and we'll continue to do small groups, and I think that's part and parcel of even the Wesleyan movement is small groups done well. So I'm not at all trying to discredit that. However, we felt like there was, at least for us in our scenario, a another level that we could move to. And this next level is represented by one-to-one discipleship relationships. And so we knew that there's a hunger for that, but we just didn't have a good resource or tool to put into people's hands to start those sorts of relationships. And there's a lot of books you can buy, of course, but we wanted to do something that would engage different types of learners, that would allow people to walk together through life's journeys. And the thing about discipleship is that it's not just this perfect linear up and to the right sort of movement, right? It's kind of a crazy up and down journey, and it often is reflective of the contours of life as they happen to us. And so, for example, if a loved one passes away, right, so that can often be a portal for discipleship to happen in somebody's life. Now you're thinking about matters of eternity and life's ultimate questions that you may not have been thinking about otherwise. Or some Jehovah's Witnesses move in next door, and now you're trying to examine, why do I believe in the Trinity? Exactly, and that's another opportunity for discipleship. So the things that happen in our lives become these opportunities for us to engage the Scriptures and engage with God. And so we want to create something with that lens, where we can look at the things that happen in our life as moments for discipleship to occur, if we just kind of look at them, with those lenses on. And so we talk about 4 movements that we want to see a disciple make. And in fact, I think we have the slide. Let's put the slide up, and I'll talk about that for a second. So a disciple is always moving in a particular way. We're not static. And I often tell people that I'm not so sure that God cares as much with where you are as with what direction you're headed. And so the first direction to move is up, and that's union with God. Okay, how are we becoming more and more taking on the mind of Christ and becoming more and more like God in our lives? The down arrow represents communion with others. So we're moving towards being firmly planted and rooted in a community. That's why it's a down arrow, because you're planted in a community with other people. It's not this thing where you can up and leave, right, as soon as things get annoying. But you're committed to the long haul of relationships with other people. So that's communion with others. And then the next arrow is the forward arrow, justice and mercy. The disciple is called to move outward into the world, making a difference for the sake of the kingdom. And then the fourth arrow is backwards. That stands for making disciples. In other words, the disciple is called to find somebody who's behind them on the journey and help them move farther down the journey, down the road. So that's our directions of discipleship, and that's kind of our model for this pathway. Each of the 10 modules of the pathway addresses one of those 4 arrows. In fact, the first 9 modules address the first 3 arrows, and it kind of cycles through them 3 times. Megan will talk more about that in a moment. But the idea is that each time you go through a set of those first 3 arrows, you're kind of getting deeper and deeper into that direction. And then the 10th module is where we really are going to hammer home that making disciples, that 4th arrow. And I should also put out this caveat here that the pathway is not done yet. We're only through module 6, but it's online, it's live, and anybody that wants to can go in there and use it. We'll talk about where to get to it later. But we just figured people were asking to be able to use it, so we put it up there when we only had like 2 modules done, and knowing that we're going to keep working on it even as people are working through the pathway. As long as we're 1 module ahead of everyone else, I guess we're okay. So when you get in there and start clicking around, if there's stuff that's not done yet, you'll know why.
Megan, you want to tell us a little bit, take us into the pathway. I love that graphic because it just kind of simplifies for us. And I love that justice and mercy are included in, because one of the things we've been saying in CMAD about our definition of discipleship is that justice and mercy are just a part of our discipleship life. It's not something outside. It's not just something for some small fringe group, but it's a part of who we are. So I'm excited to see that. But tell us a little bit about the modules, because I've had an opportunity to take a look at what you've done so far, and I want you to just share a little bit about the modules.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the way that we have it designed, like we mentioned before, that discipleship is ultimately a Christian who makes a deliberate decision to follow Jesus and to allow him to master them entirely. That is our goal. And that's done by living our everyday lives in conversation with Jesus, learning from him. And so in everything that we did in designing the pathway, we wanted to make sure that you never could feel like you were hiding behind accomplishment, like productivity. It's not about completing certain tasks or things like that, but everything that we do is designed to be anchored first in this first module that we have. It's prayer. Ultimately, the goal of that module is to establish a conversational relationship with God, where you leave that module truly understanding that you are with God, that you are with Jesus, that you can talk back and forth with him all day long. And we give a lot of different ideas for practices, tools that you can use, but we want it to be established in that idea that you're truly connecting with the person of Jesus. And so as you do that in the first module, you move on and continue processing through those arrows like we talked about. And like Phil said, every module that we progress through, it sort of just takes you deeper into that direction with that arrow. And so it's meant to just kind of work together. Everything that you do in the modules as you progress through them is really meant to be something that establishes a really deep relationship between the discipler and the disciple. And so it's much less about answering a lot of questions in every meeting, and it's much more about that connection that happens between those two people. And so as you process through the modules, we have 10 modules. Like you said, every one of them is made up of 4 meetings. And so you can have flexibility to meet weekly or bi-weekly, depending on how much time you want to commit. And then also I should say, at the very beginning, there's a very clear covenant that you create between the disciple and the discipler that makes it very clear that the point of this is to have this set apart time to be discipled, but at the end of it, you will be discipling someone yourself. And so right from the beginning, there's this expectation that you are going to make a disciple and continue this process, and that they will do the same thing. And so it's very important that everyone understands that at the beginning. So at the very first meeting, that's what you do. You get to know one another if you don't already, and you establish what this relationship will look like. And you know at the beginning that you will be making a disciple yourself at the end of it. And even if it works out well for the person who's being discipled, they can actually start discipling someone in the middle of their own pathway. So they might be being discipled by someone else, but be making a disciple halfway through. So I have been discipling my disciple for 3 months, and tonight she's going to have her first meeting with the disciple that she's going to be meeting with. And so she's kind of off and on the way, and now she's bringing someone along with her.
We call those discipleship grandbabies.
Yes.
I was going to say, that is multiplication,
Right.
Discipleship multiplication.
That's the win.
Yeah.
Right? That's the big goal to celebrate.
Yep.
In action.
Yeah.
I love the fact that you said, we started with saying there are 4 movements because you want to continue to move. So is within those 4 movements, can a disciple be in multiple movements at the same time, or is it sequential where you're like, okay, we're moving this direction first and we're moving in this direction and we're moving in that direction? Can you elaborate on that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the way that we do it is, and I'll just kind of read this off so that it can make sense. And you can put up that slide too. So what we do is you've got that first arrow, union with God, and then communion with others, and justice and mercy. So between the 10 modules, the first 9 modules cycle through those 3 first arrows again and again and again. So what you do is you start with a module on prayer, all about establishing a conversational relationship with God. The second module takes you to that second arrow, communion with others, and that is all focused on guidance. So essentially, it's establishing a relationship between the discipler and the disciple of spiritual direction. And so as you go through module 3, it's all about self-denial. So when you think about justice and mercy, the first thing you need to do before you can begin to engage, in the world is understand what's holding you back. And so that first step is just understanding self-denial. We talk about downward mobility, things like that. So that's what we do in the first set of the 3 arrows. And then we cycle back to that first arrow, the connecting with God again. So in Module 4, we go into Scripture. So just like within the first module, we talked about prayer, having a conversational relationship with God. So what we do in this next one, when we come back to that arrow, we're understanding how to interact with Scripture, not to just read it, but to actually interact with Scripture, another type of conversation that we can have with God. And so that's what that entire module is focused on. And then in Module 5, it's all about confession. So you go back to that down arrow. And so not only are you learning how to connect with your discipler and have that type of spiritual direction type of relationship, but now you get deeper into this understanding of what it's like to actually openly practice confession with one another and things like that. So it just gets a bit deeper, it takes it down another level. And then Module 6 is all about generosity. And so that's that justice and mercy arrow again, but what we're doing is understanding what it would mean to embody the freedom of generosity. It's about so much more than simply giving, but the freedom to just understand the incredible resources that we have in Christ and that they can constantly be moving out into the world. And so that's what we do. So it just kind of keeps bringing you deeper and deeper. Module 7, we go back to that up arrow, connecting with God again. And it's all about worship. So it essentially focuses on the sacramental nature of everyday life, that all of life is really a call to worship, and understanding things like a theology of work, understanding Sabbath, things like that. So worship, just a really full circle view of what that is. So connecting with God everywhere you are, all the time. And then the next time that we go through communion with others, that down arrow, we focus on hospitality. And so for that one, that's all about welcoming the other, whatever the other is to you in your context, to see the other, to understand them, or begin to seek out people that you have been able to ignore for one reason or another, and begin to connect with them. And in that module, we also focus on evangelism, which is obviously something that starts from this very hospitable drive to go reach out and bring in anyone who's not in yet. And so that's what we do for Module 8. And then in Module 9, you go back to that justice and mercy arrow again, and we focus on living justly. That sounds very broad, but what we do is we really focus on understanding the things that make us most angry, the things that have wounded us the most in life, and how it is that when we pinpoint those things, we can actually begin to discover the places where God may be uniquely calling us to actually go out and seek justice in the world, to zero in on something that God is uniquely equipping and calling us to do. So that's what we do. So it just kind of keeps zeroing in on kind of the heart of what these arrows are. And then, like we said, the last arrow, we go that back arrow and actually talk about preparing yourself to make a disciple, what that looks like, and how to keep that going, that it's not something that you commit to for 10 months, but it's something that you do for your lifetime.
Megan, we have a question that has just come in from our Facebook group. So I'm just going to toss this question out here and so that we can answer it. I want to say a shout out to everyone else who wants to send in a question or comment. Come on and jump on in this conversation. This one says, as a young solo rural pastor who's working on implementing a discipleship process in our church, I'm very excited to sit in on the webinar. One question I have is, can you answer if there have been some basic resources that you've used in the creation of your discipleship formation process? This could be books, other models, etc., that you would want to share that you used as you were preparing your model. So that's one question that's come in from our chat world.
Yeah, so there's actually a lot, and in fact, if you go into the pathway, and I'll just go ahead and give the web address now. It's ransom.church/discipleship. So ransom, ransom.church/discipleship. And you'll be there, you'll be able to kind of click around and see stuff. But when you click on the link that says enter the discipleship pathway, you'll see all the modules there. You click on, say, module 1, you'll notice that there is a Module 1 resources page, and there's a resource page for every module. And part of each resource page is a list of, like, for further reading, resources that have to do with that particular module's outcome that we're trying to see embodied by the disciple. And so there's a ton of resources there that we can talk about. But some stuff that you use even in the pathway, for example, in Module 3, you read through a book by Henry Nouwen, The Selfless Way of Christ. That module is talking about self-denial. It's part of the out arrow, justice and mercy. And before you can be just or merciful, you got to get over yourself, right? So we're going to read through that book by Henry Nouwen. There's a few other examples like that, even some smaller readings, some videos that we watch throughout. So, yeah, there's a lot of stuff. I would say, though, too, that this did come out of a certain amount of dissatisfaction with the resources that we had seen so far. We just felt like, in my interactions with people who want to be discipled, they're at all different levels, all different learning styles. For some people, sitting down and reading a book, cover to cover, that might be great. For others, that's not going to really do it. And so we thought, man, we just need to take the best of everything that we've experienced and read and seen and learned. We're both Wesley Seminary people, and so we've kind of gone through this process of learning. And so we've got like a zillion resources that we've had to read through. It's like, man, we've got so many good resources that we're aware of. We could just kind of put all these things in this pathway and help expose people to it. So it's really kind of it's a mixture of a lot of different things that we've read over the years.
And just to point out, I think we mentioned this before, like you said, Kim, everything is available online for free for anyone to use. And so if someone is looking at this, they can feel free to just begin. And if they have questions, they can always contact us and let us know. That's all easy to do from the website. And yeah, it's made up of everything that you need to complete the pathway is all included on the website. Like Phil said, there are a couple times where the disciple will read through a book. We tried to keep that to a minimum so that it wouldn't feel like we were needing to order or purchase books all the time. But with the Henry Nouwen book in particular, we thought was important enough and good enough that we wanted to include that pretty significantly in the pathway. But nearly everything that you use as a resource in the pathway is free. It's available online. Everything in the pathway is designed to be accessed either through your smartphone, online any way that's most convenient for you, or everything is also in PDF format. So if you want to download it and then print it off and create a binder or something like that, if you're a paper person, you can do that. But everything that's in the pathway that you need to complete the pathway, other than a couple of resources you need to order, is all accessible there for free. So if it's a document that we created, my disciple just completed a fasting exercise where she read the introduction to fasting. That's a PDF that's online that she could access through a link, but we could also print it off if that was easier. Those types of things are all available there. So just want to make sure it's very, very clear that we want people to be using this right away. And if you have questions along the way, you can certainly ask them, but we welcome anyone to begin using the pathway right away.
And it's designed that you could just sit down, open up your smartphone, go to your bookmark, and start rolling, But there are people at our church who prefer to print it off and put it all in a binder. Either way, you can do both.
Yeah, I want to go back to the word generosity again, because I know we've had conversation with you guys before, and you guys have, again, been so generous in sharing the Discipleship Pathway with the Resource Center, so that way we can share it then. So soon it will be available there as well for those of you that come to the Resource Center for a lot of resources. Ransom Church is making that available too, so we're working on getting that together right now. So you guys, just the way you have put it together, poured your time, your energy, your prayers into, and say, hey, this is just not something we're keeping here. We want this to be utilized for anybody who needs this stuff, and we love that.
Yeah, well, that kind of feels like it makes our time more worthwhile if more people are using it, right? So,
Definitely.
If you want to use it, we're excited about that, and I hope that it blesses people. And I'd even love to hear any success stories or even feedback that people have as they use it. So please feel free to let us know.
I want to jump back to the modules. One of the things that, as I was going through the modules, that I noticed is that you actually have a desired outcome. In other words, it's not just all head knowledge, but there's some practical things that at the end of the process, here's a disciple who, has some certain characteristic. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's something that kind of distinguishes your materials from some others that I've seen, and that is that you actually have in mind what you want this disciple to look like at the end of the process, and you've built in pieces to encourage that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I will. And before I even get to that, I'll mention, if you go to that website I said earlier, ransom.church/discipleship, there's like a 10-minute video that we made on how to use the pathway. And we'll talk about the importance of outcomes in that. It's all about these outcomes. So each of the 10 modules has an outcome that we want to see the disciple embody by the end of it. So for example, module 1 is the up arrow, and it's prayer. So it's the disciple, here's the outcome is the disciple establishes a meaningful rhythm of daily prayer. That's it. And so we say that when we're training people on the pathway, we say, that's what matters, that happens. All the little tasks and assignments or readings that they do or activities that they do in the module is secondary. That's all our suggestion, essentially, of how you might help your disciple embody that outcome. And then by the end of module 1, they're actually supposed to write down their game plan for daily prayer. And we say if one particular meeting, discussion, activity, assignment, whatever the case may be, if that doesn't really do it for your disciple, then feel free to do something different. All that we care about is the outcome becomes embodied in that disciple, right? And so, every module has an outcome. Module 3 is self-denial, and the outcome is the disciple learns the value of denying themselves for the sake of God and others, right? Mm-hmm. So everyone's got something like that, and the most important thing is that occurs.
Yeah, I didn't want to. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Megan.
That really ties into what we were talking about embodiment. So often when people wonder what is a disciple, what does it actually mean to be a disciple? Not only are we saying a disciple is a student of Jesus, someone who's actually living their everyday life with Jesus and learning how to live their life from him, but that if you want to go further into that, we hope that that's what those outcomes accomplish, is that they start to describe what the life of an actual disciple would look like. That if you are actually a disciple, that you will embody that you will embody a meaningful conversational relationship with God, for example. And so we're always all on a journey with that, but we're trying to give people a bigger imagination, a bigger picture of what it looks like specifically to be a person who's living as a disciple. So we hope the outcomes do that.
I'm so glad that you shared that. I'm going to come back to that in a minute, but we've got another question that's come in from the chat room, so let me throw this out to you. It says, in this discipleship pathway, does each discipler typically just focus on discipling one person? So here's a practical question that's being asked.
Yeah, we have a handful of people that are discipling more than one person right now. I wouldn't go too high with it. And I mean, you know your rhythms. And like, there's one lady at our church who's retired and just has time. So I think she's got, 3 or 4 young ladies that she's discipling. But I mean, that for her, that's a meeting, 3 or 4 days a week with somebody. But she's got the time and she wants to, so no problem. But, if you got a job and families, then, 1 or 2 is probably what we'd recommend. Mm-hmm. So, but it's totally something somebody could do, for sure.
I want to go back to the... I see you and you see me, but we're figuring out who's talking when. Go ahead, Megan, then I'll come right after you.
I was gonna add to that question usually has 2 parts. So people are wondering, can I disciple more than one person at once in separate meetings? But also sometimes people wonder, can I disciple 3 people at once, kind of like a small group? Yeah. And we discourage that. I think there could be maybe a circumstance where a married couple would want to disciple another married couple or something like that, and that could work. But really, this pathway is designed to work best between one discipler and one disciple. And when you start to add people to that, it loses something. So for the most part, we would say it's really best to have one disciple with one discipler and to keep it that way.
Can I give a quick example of why that's true? Module 2, we call it guidance, and the outcome for that one is with the help of a guide, the disciple discerns their unique role within God's story. This is a really important module because we talked, and this ties into our discussion of holistic discipleship too, because holistic discipleship takes into account all of the things that have happened in my life that God has used to make me into who I am now. And part of it is going back and analyzing my life up until this point and saying, God, what kind of unique circumstances have I been in, and how have you redeemed or used those circumstances to form me into the kind of person that I am today for your kingdom? And so the person actually makes a timeline of their life and like ranks and kind of puts a number system of value to positive or negative to all the things that have happened. And then we go back and we look at those negative values and say, okay, well, that was a bad thing that happened. But in what way may God have redeemed it? You know, not necessarily why did God cause it to happen? That's not what we're asking. We're asking, in what way has God used that to make you into a person that might be uniquely gifted to bless somebody else because you've gone through that experience? And that is a long process. You know, that takes hours of discernment and thought and discussion. And then at the end of that, they're going to write a life theme. Okay, so based on the kind of unique tapestry of my life, this is, at least in this season, the theme that I think God wants me to kind of cling to as sort of a mission or a vision statement for my life right now. So that's something that's hard to do with a group of people because it takes a lot of careful listening, kind of a spiritual direction sort of thing on the part of the discipler, and just really listen to the Holy Spirit and what are the ways that He's kind of nuancing the things that I've experienced in my life.
This is a very, very in-depth process, which I love. One thing, I was kind of doing the math earlier, and I think you said 10 modules and 4 meetings for each module. So you have plenty of time to go with that person one-on-one and dig deep and develop the relationship there and guide them. This is not a, you're in and out in 30 days, unless you're trying to speed through it, which is lovely that it is built that way for you to take your time, prayer, develop the relationship, get to know one another that you're discipling, and just use the tools and the resources to really pour in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. We really want it to be a significant moment in that disciple's life, something they remember for the rest of their life. We really want this time that you are led through the pathway to be something that truly you will remember for the rest of your life, that you will leave it changed significantly, and you will keep going and making disciples of your own. But we want this to be a shift point in every disciple's life.
Yeah. The fact that there's 10 modules of 4 meetings means that there's 40 meetings. We didn't intend to have such a biblical number. It just kind of happened. But we were happy about that. We imagine it taking about a year or so, So if you're meeting every week, and then you miss a few weeks in the summer or something like that, it would take about a year. But it could take 2 years too. That's okay. Like, you don't have to meet every week. You could go every other week. Whatever's the best for your rhythms.
I'm glad that you mentioned about that rhythm. Another point I think that maybe we should lift up is that this is somewhat customizable because of different learning styles, because of different cultures, because of different ways people embrace things, that you have a structure there, I think, that can be customized to fit various other cultures. So that I think that's important too. I want to ask you now. I want to just ask you. You're in the program. People are going through the discipleship. Do you have any stories that are coming out of this process? People being in the pathway, and what are you hearing?
I could tell a version of something that just happened to me. On Sunday, I had a meeting set up with a woman from our church who is actually discipling someone else. And she had just, she had some really incredible experiences in prayer recently, and she just wanted to get together with me to talk more about it and ask me some questions. And she is just a remarkable woman. I love her so much, and she's constantly helping other people grow. But this was something that she had just felt like she had a really significant amount of growth in her own life, and she just wanted to process it. And so we got done with that meeting, and then later we have 3 services every morning at our downtown campus. And after the 3rd service, I was walking out and I was stopped by another woman in our congregation who just needed someone to talk to. So we stopped and sat down. She had a lot of things she just wanted to talk through. And in the middle of it, she said, I'm being discipled right now, and I'm going through the Discipleship Pathway. And she said, as I was going through the materials this week, and I think she's working through some things with confession and things like that, she said, I just knew I needed to talk to Megan. I needed to just go find Megan and talk with her and tell her all these things. And I said, who's discipling you? And it was the woman that I had just met with earlier that morning. And so it turns out, without them knowing, I didn't know that they were in a discipling relationship together. I didn't realize that. And so it was just the neatest thing for me to have had a meeting with this discipler who is just this remarkable woman who's pouring into all these people in our church, but she's growing and she is seeing all this change in her own life. And she's pouring into this other woman who felt very convicted by, it was the combination of what she had done in the pathway that week and the sermon that left her think she needed to come and find me and just talk with someone and really kind of practice confession, to actually practice it. And so that was so remarkable for me to see how those things are working together, and also that it's combined with just what is happening through our church, And so seeing all of that come together was an incredible gift for me, just to see how it all locks in.
One of the remarkable things that I know about that's happened is our lead pastor, Phil Tagg, he's discipling a guy who said to him one day, say, hey, can I bring my friend? My friend is interested in this too, and can I bring him to our meetings? And so Phil's like, yeah, of course. And so he brought his friend, and I think that they were kind of hoping that maybe Phil would disciple this guy too. And in the course of the conversation, Phil's saying, well, why don't you disciple him? He's your friend, right? You should disciple him. And of course, Phil's disciples, I couldn't do that. But Phil starts, it's just a wonderful opportunity for him to say, listen, you don't have to be a guru or anything. You don't have to know everything. You just, if you're here and he's here, then you guys are ready to roll. You just have to be one step ahead of the other person that you're discipling. And it's this awesome opportunity for people to realize that they really can do it. This is how our faith has spread for centuries, right? Is people taking it upon themselves to make somebody else's spiritual life a priority. And so it was a light bulb moment for them, I think, where it's like, wow, I really could do that. You're right. Yes, I could take somebody through the pathway. We've been doing it. It's not complicated. I can do this. So when those light bulb moments happen, that's pretty cool. It's part of this is helping people realize that there's more in them than they think. They have something to offer. They can disciple somebody. And just giving them this simple tool often is the permission that they need to do that.
That ties into something that's coming in from the chat room. One is a comment and one is a question. The comment was, I can see why that wouldn't work with a larger group. I don't see why it couldn't be done with 2 or 3. That was the comment. Another question is coming in from the chat room, and you were kind of speaking to that, Phil. It said, at what module do you encourage the discipled to become a discipler? And so you were kind of speaking to that.
Yeah. We don't have necessarily a set moment where it can happen, but I think as long as you're one module ahead, honestly, that seems to make sense to me. Mm-hmm. It's remarkable the kind of the low bar that Jesus had. Even, this guy he was casting demons out of this guy 10 minutes ago, and now he's like, hey, go evangelize your village. I need you. You're my person here now, right? And so we're trying to help people realize that. It's more about what direction you're headed than with where you're at in the journey, right? And if you're moving towards God and somebody wants to move towards God with you, then let's do this together.
Yeah, but it's almost what do you have in your hand? Whatever experiences, whatever things we've gone through, whatever God's grace has helped us, that's what we can share. And that's all we need to share. We don't need to share somebody else's testimony or somebody else's story. It's what God has done in our lives.
And it really focuses on that interactive nature of what we hope the pathway inspires is interacting with God constantly in every possible way that you can in every everyday situation that you're in. And so it's this idea that, there is no waiting period before God first is speaking to you, and how that can immediately bring about internal and external change in your own life and in the lives of the people around you. And so, by the end of the 10 modules, there's a very clear point where you absolutely must make a disciple if you're to keep up, with the point of the outcome. But like we said, there's no point at which you need to pass a certain place before you could make a disciple. If it's right and you're ready to do it, we just encourage you to do it and then continue on in your own journey too.
And I don't want to make it sound like I'm being flippant, or as though this is some, when I say like low bar that Jesus had, obviously in one sense. In another sense, that's not true, right? He says, be holy as your heavenly Father is holy, or be perfect as your Father is perfect. So, but there's a sense in which perhaps people become their own worst enemy, and when they're trying to imagine whether or not they could do something like this. And over again, we just started to see that people have a lot more potential for this than they realize. And so we're trying to help them realize or see that potential that they have already.
Let me ask you this question. What are you wrestling with in terms of discipleship? I mean, you've made a progress with this wonderful pathway. What's stirring in your heart? What are you wrestling with in terms of discipleship there at Ransom, or just in general? What's stirring?
Oh, well, honestly, one of the things that I've wrestled, I was just thinking about this morning, is, you could have a room of 10 people, all of them part of the same denomination, all of them would probably check the same boxes doctrinally. But it seems as though in our just where we're at right now as a nation, as soon as you step outside of kind of the sphere of doctrinal beliefs into politics, for example, all of a sudden we're all over the map as far as what we think. What's the role of discipleship in that disparity? So that's one thing I'm wondering about. And then on a more practical level at our church, we're also talking about how does our discipleship pathway interface with our small groups, and is this somehow in competition, or how can the two of them work together to accomplish the same goal? That's something we don't really have an entire answer for yet, but we're trying to figure out, because we don't want to take up. We always talk about how many time slots we can ask of somebody during the week, and if you're discipling somebody and in a small group, and you're serving on a serving team or in the community, and you've got worship, like all of a sudden we have a lot of time slots that people are giving. And so we're asking those sorts of questions. We don't have a good answer, but we are. I will say that we're trying to move to a place of prioritizing the discipleship pathway in this season.
Mm-hmm. You're wrestling with some of the same questions, that first one, that I'm thinking about these days too.
If you have any good answers, let me know.
I want to converse. That's a conversation. That is a conversation. Yeah. I think it's on many hearts, though. I want to just thank you for how much you've poured into this discipleship pathway. I want to encourage everyone, go to the website. If you could throw the screen up one more time. They've made it clear. They've made it simple. There's a video for the discipler that will help you to know how to deliver the material. And it's just so practical. It's so approachable. So I just want to encourage you to go and look at that. And I want to thank you. I want to thank the two of you for coming on today and just sharing your journey. That's what we do. We just kind of share. Here's something that we're doing. It might be helpful. And thank you for being available, offering to be available to those who want to contact you. So thank you so much to Megan and Phil.
Let me give a quick email address. If anybody does want to ask any questions, just go to email spiritualformation@theransomchurch.org.
Say it one more time.
spiritualformation@theransomchurch.org.
Thank you.
TERANSOM.org, and we'll get that.
Thanks for your willingness. We've got a couple minutes here. I want to turn to Jackie Bledsoe and tell us a little about the Resource Center, because this is the type of thing that will be available, but there's so much more. We've got just a few minutes.
Yeah, the Resource Center is phenomenal. It's we actually released it last fall. And within that time period, it has just grown and reached across the globe. So basically what it is churches create resources, whether that be sermon series, whether that be policies and procedures, whether that be kids ministry things, whatever it is, discipleship pathways. We are just putting together a site, and it's there where you can share those resources, so churches wherever that have needs to those type of resources can come and download them for free. So similar to the heart of what you guys are doing there at the Ransom, Phil and Megan, that's the heart of the resource center, is just make this available for many people to get it. So we have Ransom has submitted resources. Plenty of churches have submitted them. There's been individuals create Lent and Advent resources specific to that particular year, and we are loving the results that we're getting. We actually had a church that we found on social media that was using one of the resources, one of the sermon series, and they are in New Zealand.
So this is going around.
So it is going around the globe, and you can go there. You can visit it by going to wesleyan.org/resource center or resources. Resources. So go there on the homepage. You can click up in the top right hand. You can see that. But we are so excited to get the Discipleship Pathway on there. So we have access to that because you guys have shared that with us. So we'll be getting that up there. And we'll be doing it in a part 1 and a part 2. So part 1 is what you guys have created. Once you get part 2 done, we're going to be knocking on your door, making sure we get it so we can share it with everybody else. But it is a great place. So whether you are a church who needs those resources and say, okay, we can't create all that, we don't have the time, the staff, the creative talent around, go there and utilize what you can. If you're a church that has the staff and the ability to create that, share it for those local churches that aren't able to do it themselves. It's just a wonderful place for churches to come together on both ends.
Jackie, I'm looking at some numbers of people who have used is this correct?
That is correct. Yeah,
that number correct?
Yes, that is correct. And this is actually, this is our most recent one. So was that 26,000 people?
26,000. So you're on to something there.
Yes. And I think at that time there were just 12 churches that had contributed to all the different resources on there, which are now like 160, 180, somewhere around that. So there are plenty of resources for you out there to check. Go through and search it. They've got it up on the screen now. So that's what it looks like. I just encourage you to go through it, play with it, see what's out there, put in the search what you're looking for, see if you can find something to help out your local church.
What's the most popular resource that's been uploaded or downloaded?
Yeah, definitely the seasonal. So Lent and Advent, there was a big desire, and churches were reaching out looking for them, and we were able to gather some creators to create the content, and then some churches that already had the content to share. And once we put that out there, it just went wild. So I think the highest one was probably our most recent Lent resource. And so that was just amazing to see people jump on there and grab it and utilize it in churches all over the place. I'll speak for myself. I wasn't expecting it to go across the globe like this so soon, but now it has, and it's being used everywhere. Just you're seeing the gospel spread through this resource center and the resource that all the creative and talented pastors and churches are putting out there.
And that makes me think again of Phil and Megan. You guys are just tremendous writers and thinkers, and God has gifted you in this area. You have created such a beautiful resource. Who knows, maybe we'll be hearing about New Zealand, Kenya, or somewhere and doing the Discipleship Pathway. But I want to encourage everyone to please check that out. It's really just a wonderful, practical, approachable model that is in keeping with the 5 intentions and prompts of CMAD discipleship. And so they're hitting all of them. I want to thank everyone who's tuned in today. I want to tell you that on July 19th, that's our next webinar, we'll be talking about multiplying discipleship. And so our guest is going to be John Weiss from Trinity Wesleyan Church, and we invite you to join us on July 19th as we talk about what it means to be a multiplying discipler. And so until next time, I'm just encouraging you to walk in God's shalom and God's blessings and peace to you.